קודם כל אני מבקש לחמם קהל שאני מרצה באנגלית, אבל מצד שני דומני שהשפה הכי מתאימה להיכנס בעומק הסדרה זה אנגלית. Also because it's very late, I'm not going to be able to really do justice to what I've prepared, the theoretical framing of this discussion, but I'll just get to the main point. So, needless to say, the anonymous Kabbalists responsible for composition and redaction of Zoharic homilies were influenced by divergent views regarding the respective nature of Hebrew and Aramaic. I will mention now just one rabbinic tradition and the respective attitudes of Abraham ibn Ezra and Yehuda Halevi. With regard to the former, I have in mind the teaching V'amar Rabbi Yochanan Kol HaShoel Tzrachav B'Arami Ein Malachei HaSharet Nizkakim Lo She'ein Malachei HaSharet Makirim Arami. It's in Bavli Shabbat. Whatever the original intention of this maxim, it had important repercussions in the Jewish religious imagination, and this is especially true within the Zoharic compilation, wherein Hebrew is privileged, even though much of the text was composed, as we know, in Aramaic. Striking a different note, Abraham ibn Ezra famously claimed, building on some other rabbinic passages, that Aramaic is the primordial language, even though he also affirmed that there is an underlying unity of Hebrew, Aramaic, and Arabic. Closer to the bone of the Kabbalah, as it were, is the view espoused by Yehuda Halevi. Like Ibn Ezra, Halevi noted the affinity between the three languages, but he nonetheless maintained the superiority of Hebrew, the Lashon Kodesh, compared to the others, which were classified as Lashon Chol. Following Halevi, and in consonance with an older trajectory in Jewish sources of an agadic, magical, and mystical nature, the Zoharic authors affirmed that Hebrew alone is the matrix language, or the ontic stuff out of which the entities of the world are semiotically created. Yet for Halevi, as for the Zoharic authors, the topic is more complex, insofar as the relationship of the profane to the holy fluctuates between a monistic correspondence and dualistic differentiation. That is, on the one hand, Hebrew and Aramaic are essentially transposable, but on the other hand, they are irreconcilably disparate. The dissimilarity is bridged by translation, although not through the dialectical sublation of disjuncture, but through the juxtaposition of the incongruent. I'm skipping a lot here. Okay. So the most striking passage about the nature of translation appears in Zohar to 129b, and because it's very long, I won't read it, I'll just summarize it. The author sets out to explain the liturgical difference between the Kedusha that comes at the end of the morning prayer as part of V'Zion Goel, and the Kedusha de Sidra, the Kedusha that is recited in the blessing Yotzer, or before the Shema, the Kedusha de Yotzer, wherein Israel describes the angelic act of sanctification, as well as the one recited in the public repetition of the third blessing of the Kedusha Da'amidah, wherein Israel sanctifies God together with the angels, both of which are in Hebrew. Whereas the Kedusha de Yotzer and the Kedusha Da'amidah are exclusively in Hebrew, the Kedusha de Sidra includes the Hebrew and an Aramaic paraphrase. Moreover, the Kedusha de Sidra can be said by an individual, whereas the Kedusha de Yotzer and Kedusha Da'amidah require a quorum of 10, since the Shekhinah is said to join those who sanctify the name in Hebrew, and such a sanctification requires a minimum of 10. Bracketing a more elaborate discussion of the halachic underpinnings of this passage, what is noteworthy for our purpose is the unequivocal claim that Aramaic is the language of the other side, Lishana de Sidra Achara, an idea that builds on the contrast made by Halevi between Hebrew as the holy language and Aramaic as the mundane. Given that the passage is written in Aramaic, it is startling that its author would assert that Aramaic is the language of the demonic, that belongs essentially to the other nations as opposed to Hebrew, the sacred language, which is unique to the Jewish people. The discussion of the Kaddish in the same passage states more clearly that the power of Aramaic is to break the force of the demonic and thereby elevate the divine glory. Begin the Yitbarche Ela de Sidra Achara V'Yistalach Kuchibirachu B'Karei Al Chola, particularly by the vigorous recitation of Amen Yehei Shmei Rabban Varach. Operative here is the principle of fighting fire with fire. One can eradicate the demonic only by commandeering the tactics of the demonic. Since this is the case, even though the Kaddish is in Aramaic, it is said only in a quorum of 10. The author of the Zoharic passage categorically posits an ethno-linguistic polarity. The holiness of Israel in Hebrew is pitted against the impurity of the nations in Aramaic. The oneness of God is dependent on discerning unambiguously that the other side is in conflict with, rather than being an integral part of the divine. The ultimate task, therefore, is to subdue and to shatter the power of evil. Interestingly, in a previous part of this homily, the explanation for the Aramaic of Kedusha the Yotzer is not to combat the demonic, but to be protected from the potential angelic envy that might arise from the fact that with the utterance of this final Kedusha, the Jews exceed the sanctification of the angels. Through concealing the Hebrew in the guise of the Aramaic, the angels are kept in the dark, since ostensibly they do not understand Aramaic. In the third passage from, again, Zohar, Chelik Bet, Kuf Lamed Bet, Amud Bet, Kuf Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph, this dualism is not only attenuated, it's subverted. Again, I won't be able to read the whole passage because it's too long. But summarizing, reiterating the point of the first passage we analyzed, the Zoharic author emphasizes that the Kedusha that recounts the angelic liturgy, the Kedusha the Yotzer, is said in Hebrew, and thus requires a quorum. The Kedusha that includes Aramaic, the Kedusha the Sidra, can be said by the individual worshiper. Even when recited publicly, it should be done so quietly to give the impression that it is not suitable for communal prayer. The point is elucidated further by the Talmudic praxis of Shnai Mikra Ve'echad Targum, whence it is deduced that the Aramaic is restrictive, miyuta, and the Hebrew expansive, revuya. The distinction is confirmed by the principle that in matters pertaining to holiness there is elevation, not devaluation, but with respect to translation, the inverse is true, because we decrease and do not increase. That is, it is recited individually and not jointly. Quite unexpectedly, at this juncture, the Zoharic text takes a turn and subverts the very duality it previously evoked to explain the use of Aramaic in the Kedusha the Sidra. The latter is depicted as a Tosefet Kedusha, vis-a-vis the Kedusha the Yotzer and the Kedusha the Amida. In order for each person to draw down something of this surplus, it was established that it could be said in Aramaic even by an individual. Unlike in the previous passage, here there is recognition that Kedusha the Sidra includes Hebrew as well. The Hebrew is to be recited so that everyone will be sanctified together by the superfluity of the Spirit, but the individual worshiper cannot recite the Hebrew and therefore should avail himself only of the Aramaic. Following this template, we can surmise that Hebrew and Aramaic are treated here isomorphically and not antagonistically. Indeed, they are homologous in shape and substance. An analogy that comes to mind is the widespread sculptural portrayal of the church and the synagogue, two female forms that are virtually identical, yet in diametric opposition, since the one is depicted as upright and triumphant, and the other is downtrodden and subjugated. There's more to say about that, but I'm going to skip it. So I'm turning now to a fourth passage, where the confluence of these two approaches reaches a kind of peak, a denouement. And this is from the Sidrei Torah section, Zohar Chelik Aleph, Pei Chet Amud Bet to Pei Tet Amud Aleph. Again, this is too long to read, but what could I do? God appears to Abraham in this passage through the agency of the Shekhinah, to which is assigned the name Shaddai. This gradation is also called Machazeh, because it is the prism Chezu, through which the supernal forms Chezvan are seen in the same manner that the images Dioknin are made visible in a mirror, Mar'eh. In fact, the words Machazeh and Mar'eh are philologically synonymous, and they symbolically allude to the same phenomena. The only variance is that the former is etymologically Aramaic and the latter Hebrew. In the language of the Zohar, V'chola Chad, Mareh, Machazeh, Chadhu, Da, Targum, V'da, Lashon HaKodesh. The rhetoric of identity cannot be clearer. The two are substantially one. The only difference, presumably, is in the linguistic cover. And yet the tone shifts as the author summons the older Talmudic tradition that angels do not heed Aramaic. He makes the crucial distinction between knowing and heeding, listening, since we must assume that angels know Aramaic, but they pay no attention to it, which is something different from the Talmudic tradition itself. The language that describes the epiphany of God is precise. That is, God is manifest to Abram b'machazeh. The Aramaic term is used to communicate that the vision was concealed from the angels. But why should it be so concealed? Since God appeared to Abram before he was circumcised. A comparison is made to Bilam, who similarly was said to see the divine through the speculum of Machazeh Shaddai. The angels might protest that this was not propitious. However, after Abram is circumcised, the term Machazeh is exchanged for Elohim, an explicit name of Shekhinah that is well known to the angels. To my ear, this text is remarkable, as it eviscerates the distinction between Hebrew and Aramaic and the implied conflict between the holy and the unholy. The use of Aramaic is not due to any deficiency in the visionary, but rather to the potential antagonism of the angels. Analogously, the lack of circumcision is not viewed as a detriment to Abram's capacity to receive the divine presence. And there is no suggestion of an internal change in his spiritual nature after he is circumcised. Consider by contrast the language of a parallel exegesis from what is known as Guf HaZohar on this verse. And this I will read. Hayad dvar Adonai el Avram b'machazeh lemor. Mai b'machazeh ela v'hahu chezu darga dechal b'yuchnin itchazian be. Amar Rabbi Shimon tal chazi ad lo ikazar Avraham havachad darga malil imeh. Uman ihu da machazeh. Dichtiv machazeh shaddai yachazeh. Kevan de ikazar hevo chulhu dargin sharan al hay darga uchedein malil imeh hadahu dichtiv era el Avraham el Yitzchak el Yaakov el Shaddai. Va'ad lo ikazar lo havo inan dargin sharan aloi lemalala. So according to this passage, there is a transubstantiation of Abraham's very body that corresponds to an alteration in his visionary status. Prior to the circumcision, only the Shekhinah conversed with him. After the circumcision, all the Sephirotic gradations spoke to him as they are refracted through the Shekhinah. In the Sidrei Torah passage, there is no indication of such a transformation. Before and after the circumcision, the locus of the prophetic vision was exclusively the Shekhinah. And the change from Machazeh to Mar'eh and or to Elohim refers to the appeasement of the angels and not to the modification in Abraham's rank or being. Especially notable is the fact that the author of Sidrei Torah positions Abraham on the same level as Balaam. Unlike other Zoharic passages, where Balaam is sharply distinguished from Moses, in this case, Abraham and Balaam are treated as if they are equal. If we further assume, and I think there is justification to do so, that Balaam is a symbolic cipher for Jesus, as many have argued, already in Midrashic literature, but also in Zoharic literature, then the implications of this passage are far-reaching and narrowing the chasm separating Judaism and Christianity. It is not circumcision that makes Abraham worthy of the vision of God, a Midrashic theme that is reworked in various Zoharic homilies. As I put it in one of the first essays I published, circumcision is an act of opening that not only ushers the circumcised into the covenantal community of God, but also places the individual into an immediate visual relationship to the divine. The physical opening, therefore, is the seal that in its symbolic valence corresponds to an ontological opening within God. It follows that the act of circumcising effects a change, turning the person into a vessel capable of receiving the theophany. In the Sidrei Torah passage, however, the vision that was already bestowed on Abram when he was uncircumcised is the same vision that Abraham had once he was circumcised. In a decidedly Pauline tone, it seems to be, the inequity between circumcised and uncircumcised is no longer vital or decisive. I'm coming to the end. Even from a linguistic perspective, this text is radically subversive Aramaic is described as being despicable to the angels, but not to God. In fact, as the author notes, the task of translating scripture into Aramaic is justified by the fact that Aramaic words are found in the body of scripture, and hence the disparity between the two languages cannot be assumed to be absolute. To be sure, Aramaic is the language of the other side, but the Zoharic text proffers different ways to decipher the meaning of this otherness. In some contexts, as the one from Sitra Torah, the alterity of Sitra Achara is significantly mollified by the fact that what is alien is construed as an instantiation of the familiar. Perhaps we would do well to explain this orientation by utilizing Derrida's appeal to the notion of identity as non-self-identity, to account for the fact that his self-identity as a Jew consisted of not being identical to himself. Once he elicited the paradox, the less one is Jewish, the more one is Jewish. Cast positively, the principle of exemplarity embodied in the figure of the Jew implies for Derrida that the more Jewish the Jew, the more he would represent the universality of human responsibility for man, and the more he would have to respond to it, to answer for it. The otherness of the Jew perforce must comprise its own other, the universal that transcends the particular in which it is contained. And with this, we return to the issue of translation and the status of Aramaic in relation to Hebrew. To translate the latter into the former is to position oneself in the place where opposites are identical in the opposition of their identity. Attunement to the Zoharic locution, V'chol achad mar'eh machazeh chadhu, da targum v'da lashon hakodesh, inculcates in the reader the supreme truth that collapses the dichotomization of the demonic and the divine, and the mirroring of the same as other, and the other as same through the glass darkly.
Thank you. I've been told by Roy, who is shepherding us through this event, that we have a few extra minutes reprieve. So if anyone has questions or comments, either for Professor אם יש שאלות או הערות או לפרופסור וולפסון או לפרופסור רוניק-נרוס, בבקשה.
מהביטחון פה אמרו שאם מישהו השאיר רנו פלואנס לבנה דלוקה בחנייה, אז כדאי שילך לכבות אותה ויקח את המפתחות.
שאלות, הערות? עייפים אני חושב. תודה רבה לכם, רבותיי. תודה רבה.